All right. Apparently, I dropped out. Um, Let me try to run this a little faster. I think you all heard the Secretary General brief the member states in what was a historical briefing, where he was also joined by the President of the Security Council, President of the General Assembly, the President of ECOSOC, and his senior department heads. I think the message from the Secretary General is clear that the UN Secretariat is continuing to work both in the field and at headquarters, that staff are motivated and committed to fulfilling their functions all over the world where we work. In terms of an update on the response to the Secretary General's call for a global ceasefire in light of the pandemic, I just want to share a few other examples in addition to the ones we've talked about. That in Colombia, there were calls from civil society for a humanitarian truce to put in place once the COVID pandemic started to unravel, even before the appeal. The Secretary General Special Representative there has been relaying the Secretary General's message on a global ceasefire, both publicly and in private engagements with stakeholders. In Yemen, Martin Griffiths, the Special Envoy, welcomed the positive response of the parties to the Secretary General's call and is calling all of the parties to meet urgently to discuss how to translate their stated commitment to the Yemeni people into practice. From Syria, the Special Envoy of Syria, Geir-Petersen, welcomed the statements made by the Syrian Democratic Forces expressing their support for the Secretary General's appeal. The Secretary General calls on all parties to the Syrian conflict to support this appeal, and the Geir-Petersen, our Special Envoy, will be in touch and working with the parties to follow through on that. There have also been statements from the UN mission in Afghanistan calling all parties in Afghanistan to also take measures to protect civilians and work towards a ceasefire. In peacekeeping missions in Cyprus, Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kosovo, Lebanon, Mali, South Sudan, and Sudan have all pushed out messages for local ceasefires in those countries. In Timor Leste, the UN country team there has been working with the government to prevent a potential COVID-19 outbreak. There's already been one case confirmed in Timor Leste. The UN team is holding regular briefings with partners and with the government in order to provide coordinated support. And we're also working there with news outlets, civil society organizations, business, youth representatives, women leaders, and others for a whole of society approach to prevention, preparedness, and response to the potential outbreak. Our colleagues at the World Food Program have launched an interactive map that shows how children's access to school meals has been disrupted by the pandemic. As you know, about 364 million school children worldwide are missing out on school meals. That includes 11 million children in 48 countries who are no longer receiving WFP school meals, and in many cases, that's the only meal they receive during the day. And the number is unfortunately set to rise. More information from WFP. UNICEF is also helping out by procuring and shipping vital supplies around the world, including desperately required personnel protective equipment to affected country. UNICEF is engaged with about 1,000 suppliers and industry leaders to find a solution to current market constraints. And in a statement issued by the UN Population Fund, its executive director, Natalia Kanem, warned that women and girls and health workers must not be overlooked in the global response. They have launched an appeal to donors targeting countries with weak public health systems and social support system. UNFPA says it's important not to forget that some of the people who are most at risk, including pregnant women who need antenatal care but aren't sure if it is safe to go to a clinic, and women in abusive relationships trapped at home for the foreseeable future and fearing for their safety. Our colleagues at IOM, the International Migration Agency, are monitoring border movements in the Thailand region. We're looking at borders with Myanmar, Cambodia, and Laos. as returning migrant workers are going back. There is a risk that returns could lead to seeding of new clusters of COVID-19 in those areas of return. UNOM is helping authorities to meet immediate needs on return, including shelter, food, and hygiene kits. UNESCO today voiced its concern about the safety of journalists in reporting during the global pandemic. The agency emphasized that journalists can work to save lives in the current emergency situation, and that journalists' physical and psychological safety should come first. UNESCO also warned that freelance journalists are especially vulnerable, as they do not always have access to the same resources and support of staff journalists. Media organizations should ensure that they are trained on sanitary precautions and equipped with protective material. And an update from how we are working at our various headquarters stations around the world. Here in New York, the UN headquarters, the number of swipes of people coming into the building today stood at about 140. Prior to the restrictions being put in place in early March, there were usually about 11,000 swipes a day. In Geneva, our colleagues tell us the number of people coming into the Palais has dropped from 4,000 on a regular day to just about 70 yesterday. And in Vienna, our colleagues tell us that more than 97% of staff at the Vienna International Center are now working remotely. Meanwhile, in Addis Ababa, the UN staff are telecommuting with about 99% of staff working from home. And these are staff working at the Economic Commission for Africa, and the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean in Chile have also put teleworking measures into place. In terms of numbers, as of today, 86 UN staff members around the world had reported to us confirmed cases of COVID-19. Most of the staff members are in Europe, but there are also staff members in Africa, Asia, Middle East, and here in the United States. Our colleagues at UNHCR today expressed concern over the mounting casualties suffered by civilians and growing displacement due to steppe clashes in Myanmar's western area. At least 21 civilians have reportedly died when a series of clashes between the Myanmar armed forces and the armed hit villages in the border between Rakhine and Chin states earlier this month. Human rights colleagues also have updates today on the situation in Hungary, Ethiopia, Sri Lanka, and Uganda. That's up on their website. And we want to thank our friends in Nassau, the Bahamas, who, despite this ongoing crisis, have paid up their regular budget dues in full, which brings us up to 75 member states who have done so. All right, let's go to questions. I think this actually worked. From ED, the Secretary General said a report on COVID-19 will be coming out next week. When next week? We hope to have this report out on Monday. It will look at socioeconomic impact and what can be done to address it. On the NPT, it has been postponed. We have, I think that was touched upon yesterday. Evelyn asks, has anybody been arrived to $2 billion appeal? We will get an update from OCHA on Monday on this. Majid asks how the crisis has impacted the UN's role, both humanitarian and political, in Iraq and Syria. Well, I mean, I think on the political front, we are continuing our work on both in both countries. I think you heard the appeal launched by Geir Peterson and the work we're doing there. We're also continuing our political work in Iraq. Obviously, our big concern is the possible outbreak of the COVID-19 on refugee and internally displaced population, not only in those countries, but all over the world. And I think we're doing what we can to work with the host countries and humanitarian agencies to try to prevent that. Pamela says, is the SG pleased with contributions that are coming in the private sector, UN Foundation, US stimulus package? Our colleagues at the UN Foundation are working with the World Health Organization on an appeal. I have to get an updates on those numbers. We're of course very thankful for every contribution that we receive. Iftikhar asked, the Secretary General has spoken strongly for support to developing countries, but not specifically on the problem of debt. I think the problem of debt is obviously part of the overall issues that will have to be addressed in helping countries that have been hit by COVID-19, developing countries. It will be part of the solidarity solution that is so desperately needed. Abdelhamid asks if I can confirm a letter has been received from the Libyan foreign minister. No, I have not. I have not seen any letter. Pam asks, what are the time estimates about cleaning of HQ and returning to in-house meetings? The cleaning of the building continued. The cleaning is not the issue. As you know, there are restrictions in place in New York City. There's no. We are working with the city, and I think there are no plans to return to in-house meetings. Obviously, if the Security Council needs to hold an in-person meeting, or we will support member states, but there is no plan to return any sort of large number of meetings. Our telecommuting is continuing as it stands, and I think it is very, very important that all of us who work at the UN in New York, whether journalists or staff, also follow the strong recommendations from the local, from the state, and from the federal government in our host cities. Anything else? Okay. Can I just confirm, Toby? I don't have anything more than what I said yesterday. I think we were pretty explicit. Check with Fahan if there's anything more on the NPT. Thank you. I'm doing well. I think, like all of us, we're learning about new ways of working and discovering new technologies, and we are look forward to working with Anka to see if we can improve how this briefing is delivered. I think we'll be doing this for the foreseeable future. All of you take good care of yourselves. We will see you on Monday. Thank you.